Hello and welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD Television. I'm Steve Lance. A brewing battle over domestic spending and aid to Ukraine is now on the horizon. And this time there's not just a partisan dispute, but also inter-party disagreement within the GOP. NTD's Melina Wisecup has more from Capitol Hill. So Melina, tell us where the difference lies here for Senate and House Republicans.
One main dispute here is whether to tie together $16 billion for disaster relief to $24 billion in Ukraine aid. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell supports the White House's Ukraine aid request, but many Republicans in the House do not support this. And we're not just seeing pushback from House Republicans, but there are also some Senate Republicans who are breaking with their own party leader on this issue.
Maintaining our support for Ukraine is extremely important.
I've said for a long time, until we secure our own borders, that I would not vote for any more funding for Ukraine. The word on the street is that Ukraine is corrupt, and we're not following the money that we're giving them as well.
I want to prioritize disaster aid to areas in the United States.
Senators Rick Scott and Marco Rubio, both from Florida, did introduce a bill to separate this disaster relief aid from that controversial Ukraine aid. Remember, their state right now is recovering from a hurricane. Another issue at the forefront here is the level of spending for the government. The Senate plans to vote on their appropriations bills next week at spending levels much higher than some House Republicans are willing to accept, and they're even willing to risk a government shutdown to bargain for less costs. Others have joined Congressman Chip Roy, pledging to oppose any funding for the DHS specifically without meaningful change to border policy. One Republican in the Senate tells me that he supports the House's hardline efforts in holding tight on this issue.
And look, we're spending 15 or 20% more than what we're taking in as revenue. We're spending this much on interest that we don't have enough money left over for things like nutrition bills, the SNAP programs.
Speaker McCarthy has suggested passing a short-term funding bill just to make room for them to get through these disputes as we approach the September 30th deadline. But then on all this mix, there's also the much-anticipated vote on the impeachment inquiry into President Biden, which some House Republicans are now saying that they're not going to pass any funding for the government without this vote assured on impeachment inquiry. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
Senator J.D. Vance introducing a new bill today that would ban federal mask mandates in public schools and public transit through the end of 2024. This comes as a number of hospitals and colleges are trying to reimpose COVID-19 mask mandates.
We cannot repeat the anxiety, the stress, and the non-stop panic of the last couple of years. That's what this legislation is about. End the mandates, end the panic, and let's get back to some common sense.
In an op-ed published on Fox News, Vance wrote, Americans should be free to live their lives, to travel, to work, and go to school without subjection to needless force. The senator added, if Senate Democrats block my legislation, they must be planning to reinstate mask mandates once again. Vance requested unanimous consent to the bill on the Senate floor, but Democrats rejected the proposal. Now the bill has to work through Senate committees before it's back on the Senate floor for yet another vote. Public health experts, including Dr. Anthony Fauci, have been calling for mask mandates again in recent days. And despite COVID concerns, President Biden is now on the way to India for the upcoming G20 summit. His main focus there will be to rally countries to bolster the World Bank. NTD's Iris Tao is following the president in New Delhi.
So President Biden is going to get here on Friday night, which is your Friday morning. And one thing that we're clear on right now is that Biden did proceed with his plan to come here despite the First Lady testing positive for COVID-19 earlier this week. So the White House says that President Biden has been testing negative for COVID for the past few days and that he has no symptoms so far.
The president's going to be masking in this 10-day period. He's going to be masking. He's going to be making sure that he is getting tested regularly, and so we're going to continue to certainly monitor for any symptoms he has.
So we will most likely see Biden wearing a mask when meeting with leaders here at the summit, and actually we might see that even sooner, as once he lands, he's going to hold a bilateral meeting with Indian Prime Minister Modi, where he's going to talk about stepping up investments in India, especially in the technology sector. And at the G20 summit, Biden is expected to really push for bolstering the World Bank as well as the International Monetary Fund, and the purpose of which is to really form a contrast with China's lending practices, which often lead to debt traps for developing countries, because these organizations, once they have more funds, will be able to support these countries with more transparent and high-quality investments. Here's what the White House said.
Just last month, President Biden asked Congress for additional funds that would have the impact of increasing World Bank financing by more than $25 billion. And we're working to make sure that other partners follow our lead.
But it is worth noting that the Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping will not appear at this year's G20 summit. So a big thing to watch for during the summit will be whether or not, or really to what extent, these leaders, including President Biden, will bring up the issue of countering China. And after the G20 summit, President Biden is traveling to Vietnam to really boost ties with that country to an unprecedented level. And that comes as Vietnam is increasingly at odds with China over disputes in the South China Sea. So that will be another arena where we might see more moves on countering Beijing.
Former senior Trump administration official Peter Navarro found guilty in a Washington, D.C. federal court earlier today.
This is the first time in the history of our republic that a senior White House advisor, an alter ego of the president, has ever been charged with the alleged crime.
Navarro was charged with 2 counts related to not cooperating with the House January 6 Select Committee. The first count is for failing to turn over documents to the committee. The second for failing to appear for testimony. Each count comes with a minimum sentence of 30 days in jail and a maximum of 1 year. He could also be fined up to $100,000 for each count. Sentencing will not take place until January 12th. And turning now to crime in Washington, D.C., a manhunt underway after a homicide suspect cutting himself loose from a hospital while in custody. The Metropolitan Police Department is warning locals to proceed with caution. NTD's Sam Wong has the details.
We're here outside the George Washington University Hospital where a murder suspect escaped police custody last night. Right now, the shelter-in-place order is very much over, but the threat is still looming in the minds of many residents. That includes some college students living around the area. The suspect is identified as 30-year-old Christopher Patrick Haynes. D.C. police describe him as a 6-foot-tall black man with shoulder-length dreadlocks and a tattoo on his neck. He was first arrested in Manassas, Virginia, in connection to a fatal shooting in northwest D.C. Later, he was checked into a hospital after complaining about an ankle injury. According to the city's police chief, Haynes fled from the hospital because one of his hands wasn't tied up to the gurney as an officer changed his handcuffs.
The question is, how could he just walk out being handcuffed? And second of all, why wasn't nobody watching him if he was a murder suspect?
Authorities soon ordered students and staff at the university to shelter in place until nearby area was cleared late Wednesday night.
We got the first alert at around 3:35 p.m. and then I didn't leave the classroom that I was in or my teacher's office until 6 p.m. But the official all clear that we were not in shelter in place anymore didn't happen until 7:30 p.m.
I was in class, so my professor immediately kept us locked down in the room, and shelter in place happened quickly.
Haynes was last spotted wearing a black t-shirt and gray shorts with handcuffs hanging off his right wrist. He was previously put under multiple assault charges but was set free each time. D.C. police are now offering a $25,000 reward for any information leading to his arrest. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Sam Wong, NTD News.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.